I was gonna take my commission and buy Ferris a car. Ah!
Jeannie, what the hell are you doing?
You trying to kill us?
40 years ago, Ferris Bueller convinced an entire city that one perfect day could last forever. He borrowed a Ferrari, took over a parade, caught a baseball game, visited an art museum, and still reached home before his parents discovered the truth. Behind that effortless adventure was a production filled with rewrites, accidents, deleted characters, editing tricks, and decisions that quietly changed the movie. The Ferrari was not real. An early cut ran roughly an hour longer, and one brief, unnamed character once carried a history that reframed Cameron's entire journey. Here are 17 weird facts you may not know about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Number 17. The Ferrari crash was rewritten because John Hughes found the perfect house.
GT, California.
Cameron's father's Ferrari was always important, but its unforgettable destruction came from a location John Hughes discovered after the screenplay had already been written. The Ben Rose house in Highland Park, Illinois, included a separate glass automobile pavilion, added in the 1970s to display a private car collection. It looked less like a garage than a museum case floating among the trees. In the earlier screenplay, Cameron deliberately damaged the car, and it rolled down a driveway into a tree stump. Once Hughes saw the pavilion, he rewrote the sequence around the building. Now the car would slip backward, break through a wall of glass, and vanish into the ravine. The crew could not destroy the structure or sacrifice a genuine 1961 Ferrari. Every pane needed for the stunt was replaced with breakaway material, and a fiberglass replica was prepared for the fall. According to production accounts, 10 cameras covered the moment because they effectively had one chance to capture it. The car went through the glass. The crew cheered. Hughes reportedly looked at the result and said he thought it looked terrible. He kept it anyway. The shot became Cameron's clean break with the fear that had controlled him all day. And no matter how painful the crash still looks, an authentic Ferrari was never sent through that window. Number 16. The parade. Used a real Chicago celebration and thousands of performers. Ferris looks as though he simply wandered onto a parade float and persuaded Chicago to dance with him. Creating that illusion took 2 separate weekends, a real city celebration, and a crowd no studio could have quietly assembled. Part of the sequence was filmed during Chicago's actual Von Steuben Day parade. The production returned for close-ups and additional coverage. A radio promotion invited listeners to appear in a John Hughes movie, and Matthew Broderick later recalled that roughly 10,000 people arrived. That scale gave the scene its looseness. Camera crews caught whatever happened around them, including workers and people dancing in office windows. Some of the reactions that make the sequence feel spontaneous were exactly that. Broderick had spent weeks rehearsing with choreographer Kenny Ortega. Then he injured his knee while filming Ferris's frantic run through the backyards. Much of the planned choreography had to be simplified. Hughes stood at a distance with a megaphone and encouraged him to make things up. Broderick was nervous, but the crowd's response changed the mood. Once thousands of people began cheering, he later remembered feeling like the king of the world. Ferris's confidence may have been acting. The roar coming back at him was real. Number 15. The first cut was almost an hour longer and included 2 more Bueller children. The finished movie moves so quickly that it is hard to imagine a version lasting nearly 3 hours. Editor Paul Hirsch said the first cut ran about 2 hours and 45 minutes. That version contained longer scenes, different pacing, and an expanded Bueller household. Ferris and Jeannie originally had a younger brother and sister. They were filmed and can still be glimpsed in early promotional material, including the theatrical trailer. Their scenes made the Bueller home busier, but both children disappeared entirely from the final story. Another deleted sequence took place inside the expensive restaurant. Ferris, Cameron, and Sloane struggled with the menu and discovered a dish involving pancreas. The scene was removed, but one small piece survived. During Ferris's desperate run home, he races through the day's events and says, "We ate pancreas." Without the missing setup, the line sounds like one more absurd detail in an already impossible afternoon. Hirsch had unusual freedom while rebuilding the movie. Because the story unfolds during one day, the main characters remain in the same clothes. Scenes could be shortened, shifted, and reordered without obvious wardrobe problems. The parade moved. Conversations changed position. Material that explained too much vanished. Ferris's day feels as if it is racing forward on instinct. That speed was found in the editing room. Number 14. One test screening reaction caused an entire Ferris and Sloane scene to be removed. Ferris could bend rules, pressure Cameron, and deceive nearly every adult in sight. But the filmmakers knew there was a point where confidence could stop feeling charming. Matthew Broderick later recalled a test screening in which a young woman said she disliked Ferris because he seemed like the kind of boy who would make her do things she did not want to do. Her reaction focused attention on a scene involving Sloane. In the deleted material, Sloane wanted to return home. Ferris kept trying to persuade her to stay out and continue the adventure, turning his charm into uncomfortable pressure. One response did not create the concern from nothing. It crystallized a problem the filmmakers could no longer ignore. The scene was removed. That cut quietly protected the balance of the movie. Ferris already pushes Cameron far beyond his comfort zone. Showing him dismissing Sloane's wishes could have made the same behavior feel less playful and more controlling. In the finished version, Sloane joins the day willingly. The movie did not need Ferris to become more innocent. It needed one moment that made him harder to like to disappear. Number 13. The Wrigley Field sequence combines two different Chicago Cubs games. Ferris, Cameron, and Sloane appear to spend one carefree afternoon at Wrigley Field. The finished sequence secretly places them inside two different games. Baseball researchers traced the television broadcast heard in the pizza restaurant to June 5, 1985, when the Cubs played the Atlanta Braves. The actors' footage inside Wrigley was filmed on September 24th during a game against the Montreal Expos. That second afternoon was anything but ordinary. Montreal won 17-15 after building an enormous lead and nearly watching it disappear. The edit works partly because the Braves and Expos wore similar light blue road uniforms. A casual viewer has little reason to suspect that the broadcast and the shots of the actors came from separate dates. Even Ferris catching the foul ball is a constructed illusion. The televised action, the crowd footage, and Broderick's reaction were joined into one perfect piece of luck. Fans have spent years trying to identify the exact date of Ferris's fictional absence. The movie refuses to give them a single answer. Ferris did not attend one historic Cubs game. He attended two of them at once. Number 12. John Hughes wrote the screenplay in less than 1 week. The idea Hughes pitched to Paramount was almost impossibly simple. A teenager takes a day off from school. Studio executive Ned Tannen approved the concept while a possible Writers Guild strike created pressure to move quickly. Hughes began writing and kept notes tracking his progress through the finished draft. He completed the screenplay in less than a week. The story's basic frame gave him something firm to hold on to. Ferris begins in bed, pretending to be sick. Before his parents return, he must finish the adventure and get back into that same bed. Everything between those points could keep expanding. The speed helps explain the script's momentum, but it also left the production with far more material than the final movie needed. Characters, conversations, and entire detours survived the writing rush, only to be removed later. Hughes found the voice quickly. Hirsch had to find the movie afterward. What remained feels like a teenager's excuse growing faster than anyone can question it. One lie leads to another, and suddenly the whole city has joined the day off. Number 11. Alan Ruck was 28 when casting initially refused to see him. Cameron Fry looks like a nervous high school senior standing just outside adult life. Alan Ruck was already 28. Casting initially resisted seeing him because of his age. His agent pointed out that Ruck was appearing opposite Matthew Broderick every night in the Broadway production of Biloxi Blues, and the two looked close enough in age for the friendship to be believable. The existing friendship mattered even more than appearances. Broderick and Ruck already understood each other's timing. They had spent months backstage trading impressions, jokes, and small attempts to make each other laugh. Broderick also knew Ruck could turn panic into comedy without making Cameron ridiculous. Ruck auditioned successfully, but the offer still did not come immediately. He later recalled that Broderick's manager continued reminding Hughes that Matthew wanted to work with Alan. That support helped settle the decision. Their history softened the pressure Ferris places on Cameron. Viewers can feel that these two have irritated, trusted, and rescued each other before. Ferris drives the plot. Cameron gives the day its emotional weight. The actor who made him feel 17 had already lived an extra decade. Number 10. Ben Stein's economics lecture was improvised. Ben Stein did not arrive on Ferris Bueller's day off as a professional actor. He was a lawyer, economist, writer, and former presidential speechwriter who happened to be visiting the production. His original contribution was expected to happen off-camera. Then the student extras heard his flat, deliberate voice and laughed. Hughes put him in front of the class and told him to discuss something he knew. Stein improvised a lecture involving tariffs, economic policy, and what was commonly called voodoo economics. The material was real. The delivery made it feel like a sedative. Stein later said that when the crew applauded, he thought they had learned something from him. They were celebrating how perfectly boring he sounded. His repeated question became the scene's rhythm. Anyone? Anyone? The joke does not depend on the teacher being foolish. He understands the subject. He simply drains every sign of life from it before the information reaches the students. Ferris is missing from class. After listening to Stein for a few moments, the audience may feel he made the responsible decision. Number 9. The movie went for decades without an official soundtrack album. Few comedies from the 1980s have a more recognizable musical identity. Dankeschön, Yellow's Oh Yeah, and the music beneath the museum sequence all became inseparable from Ferris's day. Yet moviegoers in 1986 could not walk into a store and buy an official soundtrack album. The absence was not simply an unsolved licensing accident. John Hughes later said A&M Records wanted a soundtrack, but he did not believe the film's unusual mix would work as one album. In his view, old standards, contemporary British music, film score cues, and the Beatles did not naturally belong on the same record. He did create a small promotional single for members of his mailing list, using music for which he controlled the necessary rights. The official album did not arrive until September of 2016, 30 years after the movie opened. La La Land Records and Paramount issued it as a limited edition of 5,000 copies. The limited album still did not include the Beatles' original recording of Twist and Shout. The movie had one of the decade's most memorable collections of music. For 30 years, audiences had to assemble it for themselves. Number 8. Cameron's angry telephone voice was an imitation of an imitation. When Cameron calls Principal Rooney and pretends to be Sloane's father, his voice suddenly drops into the fury of a much older man. Alan Ruck built that voice from a private joke. During Biloxi Blues, director Gene Saks sometimes became frustrated because Broderick and Ruck kept fooling around. Broderick began imitating Saks backstage, repeating his complaints that the actors did not seem like soldiers during World War II. Later, Hughes asked Ruck to invent an authoritarian voice for Mr. Peterson. Ruck copied Broderick's version of Gene's sax, preserving every exaggerated complaint and booming change in tone. He partly did it to see whether Broderick would recognize the impression during the scene. Broderick did, and it made him laugh. The anger, terrifying Rooney was really a joke carried from one production into another. Rooney heard an angry father. Broderick and Ruck heard an old friend telling them to stop fooling around. Number 7. The movie nearly lost, Twist and Shout. The parade had already been filmed around one of the most famous recordings in popular music. The production still did not have permission to use it. Music supervisor Tarquin Gotch later remembered Twist and Shout as a nightmare. The Beatles' recording was central to the sequence, but approval had not arrived, and major artists rarely licensed songs to movies as freely as they do today. Gotch feared the scene might be ruined. Permission finally came at the last minute. He recalled the cost as roughly $200,000, an extraordinary sum for the production. That clearance preserved the moment when the parade stops feeling like a local event and turns into something almost mythic. Without the recording, one of the movie's defining sequences would have needed a different musical center. The song received another burst of exposure that summer through both Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Back to School. A reissued single climbed to number 23 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song survived. So did the scene that made Ferris seem capable of stopping Chicago traffic with a microphone. Number 6. Ferris's terrible clarinet performance happened by accident. During the early scenes inside the Bueller house, Broderick noticed a clarinet and began pretending to play it. The bit was not designed as a finished musical joke. Broderick's idea was that Ferris would appear to perform brilliantly after the sound had been replaced in post-production. Hughes watched the footage and rejected the improvement. The ugly noise was funnier because Ferris never acknowledged how bad it was. Ferris lowers the instrument and proudly explains that he never had a lesson. His confidence turns the failure into the point of the scene. Nothing about him suggests embarrassment. He behaves as though the clarinet has failed to appreciate his talent. That tiny accident also gives the character one useful limitation. Ferris can manipulate a school computer, build an elaborate sick-day performance, and talk his way into an expensive restaurant. Ferris could talk his way through almost anything. The clarinet refused to cooperate. Number 5. Edie McClurg added one of Grace's most famous lines during her audition. Grace's description of Ferris is one of the movie's fastest and most memorable pieces of dialogue. She tells Rooney that the sportos, motorheads, geeks, and nearly every other group in school adore him. Then she delivers the judgment that closes the argument. They think he is a righteous dude. Edie McClurg later said the righteous dude phrase was hers and that she added it during her audition. Hughes kept it. The contribution fit his working style. Actors who understood his rhythm were often allowed to make a line their own, especially when an improvisation sharpened the character rather than distracting from the scene. McClurg's delivery gives Grace more than a list of labels. She seems genuinely delighted by Ferris's popularity and quietly amused by Rooney's inability to understand it. One audition choice turned the school secretary into the person who states the movie's social verdict. Rooney may control attendance. Grace knows who everyone actually likes. Number 4. Cameron wore a Detroit hockey jersey in a movie devoted to Chicago. Nearly every stop in Ferris Bueller's Day Off celebrates Chicago. Cameron spends most of that tour wearing the red number 9 jersey of Detroit Red Wings legend Gordie Howe. The choice came from John Hughes, who spent part of his childhood near Detroit and considered Howe a hero. The number 9 was recognizable, and Hughes used Cameron's jersey as a personal tribute. Alan Ruck also remembered a character explanation that never reached the screen. Cameron had a better relationship with a grandfather connected to Detroit than he did with his own father. The Red Wings jersey belonged to that private history. Even without the explanation, the visual contrast works. Ferris seems to fit every room, street, restaurant, and stadium he enters. Cameron crosses Chicago dressed for somewhere else. The oversized sweater can feel like borrowed armor. Beneath it are ordinary khakis and loafers, the clothes of a young man trying not to attract attention. The jersey does not announce Cameron's transformation. It quietly marks him as separate before he finally chooses what to do about it. Number 3. The museum scene did not work until the editing changed. The Art Institute sequence feels so calm and inevitable that it is surprising to learn it struggled in an early version of the movie. Hughes had a personal connection to the museum. He described it as a place of refuge from his youth and filled the scene with paintings he genuinely loved. There is almost no dialogue. Ferris and Sloane stand together. The friends move among schoolchildren. Cameron stops before Georges Seurat's A Sunday on La Grande Jatte and studies the face of a painted child. The closer the camera moves, the less complete the face becomes. It dissolves into separate points of color. Editor Paul Hirsch recalled that the museum material did not connect properly during the first preview. The order of the day was restructured and the scene's music was changed. The final version uses the Dream Academy's instrumental interpretation of "Please, Please, Please, Let Me Get What I Want." Several changes were made before the next screening, so Hirsch could not claim that one adjustment solved everything. But the finished scene finally had room to breathe. The moment suggests Cameron is searching for a whole person and seeing only fragments. For once, Ferris does not interrupt him. Number 2. Charlie Sheen's nameless character originally changed the meaning of Cameron's story. Charlie Sheen appears at the police station for only a few minutes. His character teases Jeannie, offers unexpectedly calm advice, kisses her, and disappears without receiving a name on screen. The screenplay called him Garth Volbeck. Garth had known Ferris in middle school. The deleted material described a troubled home and a young man Ferris once tried to help. Ferris spoke about visiting him, defending him, and eventually failing to keep him from drifting toward drugs and serious trouble. That history would have changed the police station scene. Garth's praise for Ferris was not random. He remembered someone who had once reached toward him, even if the effort did not save him. The missing material also suggests another reason Ferris may be so determined not to leave Cameron alone. Cameron is withdrawn, frightened of his father, and already beginning to surrender to a life controlled by other people. Garth offered a possible warning of what could happen when a troubled friend was allowed to disappear into himself. Most of that explanation was cut. The finished movie never tells us why the young man beside Jeannie speaks about Ferris with such warmth. It leaves only a trace of a larger story. Removing the backstory made the moment more mysterious. It also left Ferris's concern for Cameron to be felt rather than fully explained. Number 1. The line that defined the movie was added late. Cindy Pickett later recalled that the movie's defining line was not in the original screenplay and was added late in production. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. The words now seem to contain the whole movie. Ferris spends the day racing against clocks. He has to escape the house, return the Ferrari, cross the neighborhood, and reach his bed before his parents open the door. But everything he is trying to protect is already disappearing. The parade ends, the museum closes, the Ferrari falls through the glass. Graduation is coming, and the easy shape of this friendship is about to change. When viewers first met Ferris, many heard permission to break routine and claim one perfect day. Returning to the film as adults can feel different. The fantasy is still there, but so is the recognition that the ordinary days we hurried through were becoming memories before we understood their value. The school year ended. The children in the audience grew older. Chicago kept moving. That may be why the line has lasted longer than any stunt, costume, or carefully planned excuse. Ferris does not promise that the best moments can be preserved. He asks us to notice them. The perfect day could not last. That was why Ferris wanted us to see it. 40 years later, he is still looking into the camera, reminding us that the best days rarely announce when they are about to become memories.